The concept of taking heroes from our childhood and deconstructing them has become all too common in the last decade or so, to various degrees of success. In this video, I want to take 3 examples from comic book media of these broken down and deconstructed icons, and see why they were either so successful, such a failure, or why they were completely divisive. Starting with Thor in Infinity War. Thor was a character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that had always had a bit of an identity crisis, starting with his first film. In adapting the unworthy story before any others, they kinda didn't leave a lot of organic room for him to grow throughout multiple movies. This creates a wider problem of his character arc repeating itself in almost every movie, of trying to find himself and become a better leader. However, Infinity War really took a big shift with his character. After his entire planet was destroyed and his brothers strangled to death right in front of him, he became jaded and serious. For the first time in the MCU, the goofy and lovable god we have gotten to know is fully serious and committed to stopping Thanos, no matter the cost. He spends a majority of the movie trying to forge a new weapon powerful enough to destroy his enemies and replace Mjolnir. This all crescendoed at the end of the movie, when in a last-ditch effort, he overpowers a full-power Thanos, drilling his new axe into his chest, and nearly killing him. However, with one last defiant quote, Thanos snaps, and just like that, half the universe is dead. In Thor's mind, this was all his fault. He failed to finish off his enemy, and in the process got half of the entire universe erased. And that's the note Infinity War leaves off on. Thor is devastated, and rightfully so. How do you even come back from a failure that large? At the start of Endgame, we see the Avengers quickly find Thanos, and after learning the Infinity Gauntlet was destroyed, quickly and poetically goes for the head.
Perhaps I treated you too harshly.
Next time we see Thor, he is fat and a raging alcoholic. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't the issue to me. A lot of people go to these unhealthy outlets to try and cope with trauma, and I have no problem buying into Thor doing that. He's been shown to enjoy drinks in the previous movies, and like I said, it's something a lot of people turn towards. My issue, however, arises when it's used for the butt of jokes by both him and other characters in a mean-spirited manner.
You look like melted ice cream.
All of the characters and their trauma is taken 100% seriously by all parties except the one person who feels that it was his fault the entire universe got wiped. Rocket makes a joke about cheese whiz in his veins. Thor makes stupid jokes while playing Fortnite. I could go on and on, but the point I'm trying to get at is that this was a not good direction to Thor's character and did irreversible damage to the brand as a whole. This was made worse by Love and Thunder, by which he seems to have forgotten all that happened in these previous movies to continue joking and being the butt of jokes. Now, I have an interesting take and sort of rewrite from my friend that I'd like to share, as I think he shares a lot of sentiments with most of the fans who saw Endgame. And I quote, "Chris Hemsworth is more than capable of being naturally funny, and is capable of being serious. Thor's arc is not funny in Endgame, and it's not supposed to be. If we were to keep the main structure of it in a solution, he's broken. A failure. He's a man who has lost so much. So that means cutting back on the jokes. He's not a circus act, he's depressed, and it should be taken more seriously and tackled with more respect. I'd completely get rid of the weight gain and just not do the shirtless scenes. Less Big Lebowski and more of how he was when they built the second gauntlet. Give him some tough love from characters like Rocket, but real love from characters like Iron Man and Hulk. Have them show him and help him see that he can come back from a failure. That he's not a pathetic joke, all because he lost his mojo." Now I know that was a bit lengthy, but I think it's indicative of how invested and disappointed he was in the character, and I've seen a lot of similar takes and rewrites online. Thor had all the ingredients for a good deconstruction, but in the end they just did not know where to take his character. Wolverine was first introduced to us in the first X-Men movie. He started out self-serving, but through his relationship with other characters like Rogue and Professor X, he learns the value of bonds. In the subsequent sequels, his bonds and relationships only strengthen until he becomes a sort of de facto leader of the X-Men whenever Charles isn't around. His arc finally pays off in Days of Future Past when he risks his life to go back in time and save the world. There, he has grown so much, he is able to pull his mentor back from the deep pit of despair. This is a far cry from the Logan we first met, who was only out for himself and didn't want the baggage of attachment. That brings me to both Logan and the newly released Deadpool and Wolverine. Don't worry, I'll give a warning before any potential Deadpool and Wolverine spoilers. Let's start with Logan. Logan takes place in a distant future, when mutants are all but wiped out. At this point, Logan is totally broken. His X-Men family is dead, and all he has left is Professor X, who is in a broken down and decrepit state, barely functioning. He eventually meets a little girl named X-23, who is seemingly one of the last hopes for the future of mutants. Even still, he refuses to help her and only eventually does because of Xavier. This all stems from the fear of attachment he has. In a way, he has reverted back to how he was at the very beginning of the original X-Men, and who could blame him? He's been alive at this point for over 200 years, and he's lost so many people that he can't afford to keep letting himself be hurt. His immortality is a curse to someone as kind-hearted and loving as him, because it comes with the pain of watching so many loved ones die. After Charles, his lifelong mentor and father figure, dies, Logan mourns, and in his memory fully resolves to finish helping X-23, which all crescendos when he sacrifices his life for the future generation, dying happily, knowing that he did the right thing and gets to see his family again. What a beautiful ending to a hero a lot of us grew up with and loved to pieces. Now, what makes this deconstruction work so well? The answer is simple. It's because we had a clear understanding of who Wolverine was. Every change he went through in Logan is something the audience can understand and buy into because it's rooted deep into his character. That's what I feel is most important in a deconstruction, and what Thor was completely missing in his character arc. It didn't feel like they had a plan for his arc or an understanding of what his character was, which made it a mess and impossible to buy into. Thor in Infinity War is not the same character as Endgame or Love and Thunder.
What did you do?
In Logan, Wolverine is the same person he's always been, he's just in a bad place. Anyways, enough about Logan. Let's move on to Deadpool and Wolverine. This section will have spoilers to Wolverine's arc in Deadpool and Wolverine, so if you still haven't seen it, hop out of here. When we first meet up with Wolverine in this movie, he is very clearly not in a good place. He's much more aggressive than he was in the original X-Men timeline, as well as he's a raging drunk. It's revealed through Cassandra Nova diving in his head that in his world, he never properly joined the X-Men due to his fear of letting people into his life. After returning to the mansion from drinking one night, he found them all dead, and despite his best efforts not to be attached to them, he still wound up broken. He ended up killing many people, even including some innocents, which eventually led to the near extinction of all mutants. Now, this may sound similar to Wolverine from Logan, but there's a few distinct differences. This Logan never got to form bonds, meaning he's a lot more angry and violent. He lashes out more. He kills without any shred of remorse. And the most depressing part of all this is that he completely hates himself for it. It's revealed in the film that he wears his Wolverine suit that was gifted him by Xavier in the hopes that one day he can be the person Xavier thought he was. He hates himself because of what he let happen to his own insecurities. However, with the help of Deadpool and X-23, he is able to pick himself back up and find purpose again, even saving the entire multiverse. This is beautiful in a completely different way to Logan, in my opinion. This once again shows that deep down, he is a kind-hearted and caring character, but lets his own fears and anxieties hold him down. This time, it was unfortunately fatal to people he cares about, but the glimmer of hope still resides in him. Once again, this works because of the familiarity we have with this character. We buy into the characterization because it's consistent and believable due to what has come before. May Wolverine from the two aforementioned films serve as an example as to how you should write deconstructions in a believable and satisfying way as we move forward to Batman and Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Moving on from an example of a great deconstruction, let's talk about one of the most divisive characterizations of all time, and one of the main reasons I am making this video. Batman in BVS is completely different from almost any other adaptation we have ever seen. He is Batman who, through the loss of Dick Grayson, has let his rage completely consume him. So much so, in fact, that he brands criminals and sends them away to die. Then, after seeing the destruction of Metropolis, and with a slight push from Lex Luthor, he resolves to kill Superman. And with all that in mind, off the jump, I'm sure you can understand why this deconstruction was so controversial. Batman is known for his no-kill rule, believing that all life matters and anyone can be saved. Snyder's Batman is a deconstruction on what would happen if Batman lost that rule. To say all of this had mixed results would be an understatement. To this day, people still debate on if this was a good direction to take Batman, and so for the purposes of this video, I asked some of my friends who were super into comic book projects their thoughts. Here are the two responses I got that intrigued me the most. While Batfleck is flawed, it's a story of redemption, brotherhood, and sympathy/empathy. He's learning how to be human again. He isn't simply broken from losing mommy and daddy. He already went through an arc of adopting Dick Grayson and then losing him. This Batman is lower than any before him, as losing his parents, his son, and steadily losing Alfred has caused him to completely lose himself. However, just one moment is all he needed. When he realizes who Clark's mother was, he realized that he was just about to cross a line he could never come back from while looking another person right in the face. After this moment, he starts his arc back towards the light, and although he has a ways to go as he still blows up goons, Superman, a beacon of hope and justice, gave him a path to be better. This was a quote from my friend Blake, who after many years of hating Batman v Superman, found a newfound appreciation for it last year after checking out the Ultimate Edition. Of course, this is just one side of the spectrum, as this next comment showcases the other side of the argument. And stay saddled, because once again, this is a bit of a long one. I love Snyder's work in the DCEU, but there's something fundamentally wrong with how they decided to go about building it. They built it as a deconstruction of the heroes that we know, so instead of building its own universe, it's almost like a commentary on the existing DC property. This is not a great way to start a cinematic universe. When you have people who aren't familiar with these characters traditionally from the comics or from other sources, and you're just showing a Superman who is not the Superman we know, or showing a Batman who's really down on his luck without a code and murdering people, we have to see why that happens. An important part of storytelling is never show a drastic character change between movies, and they introduced these characters with drastic character changes, so from the get-go, there were problems. People go to the cinematic universes to see these characters on screen as we know them, not commentaries on them, not deconstructionist views on them, or anything like that. When we see Superman, we want to see Superman. When we see Batman, we want to see Batman, not Snyder's version of them. Already stated I love the movies, but I view them as Elseworld stories, which they basically are, but I'm also really familiar with all the other sources of media, these characters in it, so the changes he made for his versions didn't bother me as much as it maybe did others, but I still believe there's a very real reason why it bothered so many. This quote I picked up from a Facebook group I was part of, and I think it touches on something a lot of us feel whether we like it or hate it. There's obviously some people who are either super radical for or against this depiction that won't open their minds to the other side. But for a lot of us, I'm sure we can see the appeal or perhaps why others wouldn't like the depiction. Personally, I think there's two things that could have really helped this Batman, and it's going to kind of tie into what I said about Wolverine earlier. See, with Wolverine, we saw how deeply loss and trauma had affected him in a series of movies beforehand. In X-Men Origins Wolverine, him losing his family is the whole catalyst for why he goes through a Stryker's adamantium program. In X-Men The Last Stand, him killing Jean Grey caused him so much grief, he literally left the country and completely lost his will to live. So my first proposal, and one of the most obvious solutions, as it's been said a million times, is give Ben Affleck's Batman his own solo movie depicting his downfall. There's a real sense of show don't tell in media, and by telling us that Batman is this way without showing it, it makes it significantly harder for us to buy into, as the only other versions of this character are radically different. Secondly, this absolutely should have been Elseworlds. These cinematic universes are a window for the general audience who don't read comic books to get a real look at these characters, and when the only version they have is a complex deconstruction of the character, it leads to a lot more confusion in the fan base. I've said it before, different adaptations of characters are totally fine. They have a spot in our movies, but as the main Batman for a franchise, this was absolutely not the way to go. And that's it for characters I wanted to tackle for the comic book movie genre. Sure, there's probably plenty of other examples I could use, but those are the three I felt the strongest about. However, I do have one more character that I want to talk about. One of the most divisive character portrayals of all time. That being Luke Skywalker from The Last Jedi. That's right, for the first time on this channel, I am venturing a little bit out of the comic book movie genre to discuss another franchise I'm passionate about. Luke in this movie is very similar to Ben Affleck's portrayal of Batman. For starters, these are both characters that were shown in past iterations to see the best in everyone and trying to always do what was right. Sure, they went about it in different ways, but the core was still there. They both start the movie depressed and cynical before a third party enters the scene and helps facilitate their turn to the light. For Luke, this is Rey, and for Batfleck, this is Superman. So why in Luke's case is this so divisive? Well, I think it kind of ties back to what I said with Batfleck. The Last Jedi told us that Luke failed, and didn't show us. Yes, there was a flashback, but that doesn't change the fact that we didn't see Luke come to the conclusion he has to kill his nephew. We don't see him try and raise a new Jedi Order before failing. We don't see the failure that has led him to become a bitter old hermit. This has, of course, led to countless differing opinions and arguments for his characterization in The Last Jedi. A lot of people praise it for trying to be something new and different in Star Wars, whereas on the flip side, a lot of people consider it to be character assassination, the likes of which can never be forgiven. Now, I asked some friends in forums once again if they believed that a movie or show showcasing Luke's Jedi Order up to his decision to kill Kylo would add the context needed to buy into his character change, and well, it was split. See, my friends almost unanimously said they didn't think so, and most others agreed, with a few exceptions thinking that it would. And why is that? We watch media like Star Wars for an escape from reality. When we see Luke slowly coming into his own throughout the original trilogy and trying to pull his father back to the light, believing that he's not too far gone despite all he had done, we get inspired by it. We want to be like that. When you deconstruct something like that, someone we look up to when we were younger, and show him old, bitter, and cynical, it just doesn't feel right. That's really what I want to hammer home with this. This genre of comic books provides us with larger-than-life, inspirational heroes that we want to look up to and see ourselves in. Every time we see Batman find a solution to a seemingly impossible situation. Every time we see Wolverine find something to live for after sinking to rock bottom. Every time a character experiences failure to an unimaginable degree and pulls themselves out of it. It all helps us to escape the troubles of our real life for as long as we read those comics or watch those shows and movies. Is there a time and a place for deconstructing these characters? A time and a place for a story to tackle these deep and complex themes with the characters we idolize? Absolutely, but it needs to be done properly and with respect.
I get it. You're in a rough spot, okay? I've been there myself. And you want to know who helped me out of it?
Natasha?
It was you. You helped me.
Why did you ask then?